Well, I think it's always important to recognize today with soybeans that we're taking a program approach. We're not trying to provide pre-only weed control or post-only, but we're combining the two. And we're doing them in a time frame that allows us to really control the weeds today before they ever get out of the soil. So in our particular case, we're utilizing a lot of Trivent's soybean herbicide, which has 3 different modes of action. 2 of those highly effective for water hemp and palmer amaranth control. So it gives us a really solid foundation. And then we're coming back with a post program. You probably have heard some discussion around Enlist soybeans or E3 soybeans. We can combine Enlist 1 along with a Liberty to provide good burn down with 2 effective modes of action. And then we're adding Ever-Prex, a good residual product with that post application. We're trying to make those applications within about a 21 to 25 day period. And when we do that, we're really able to control most of the weeds before they ever see the light of day, which is kind of the ideal situation where a lot of our resistance issues and our struggles with weed control is becoming more evident is when we're simply trying to control a lot of these weeds post-emerge. So when you're putting the pre down, you want to mark on the calendar 21 days to 25. You want to be in making those applications about that time. Gives you a little bit of window with weather, okay? But often what I find is when we get outside of that 30-day period from laying the pre down to coming back post, we're starting at that point to see a lot of weeds already emerged at the time of application, putting a lot more weight on our burn down of those weeds, and that's where we're struggling a bit more for weed control today. A lot of situations that happened in 2019 due to the wet weather conditions, we weren't able to get that pre down. So by the time we got out to make that post applications, weeds were larger than we would like to control. In many cases we didn't control them. They went to seed production. We're going to be dealing with some of that in 2020. So what we're really encouraging growers to think about is instead of maybe making that pre-emerge application right at planting, might be advisable to make it a little bit earlier this season to make sure that it actually happens. So in the event that they get delayed with planting, they still have some weed protection. So when they do get back in the field situation isn't out of hand. Yeah, in terms of nitrogen stabilization, we're finding that growers are now just kind of starting to identify that if you look the last couple decades, our weather pattern, particularly rainfall, has been on the increase, particularly in the months of April, May, and June. And yet we're putting a lot of nitrogen just ahead of that period. And what we're seeing is a bit more early season loss of nitrogen. Either the nitrogen's being lost to denitrification or leaching. And if that plant doesn't have an adequate sense of enough nitrogen, enough fertility early on, that can impact, for example, with corn, how many rows around it decides to set. Instead of maybe producing an ear with 16 to 18 rows around, it might decide if it's short of nitrogen, for example, only produce an ear that's 14 to 16 rows around. So having a good fertility program early and having that nitrogen in place where you need that to be, which is an upper part of that profile, is extremely important. We're helping that customer today protect that nitrogen through N-Serve, which is what we use when we're protecting that ammonia application. If we're out trying to protect manure applications, liquid UAN programs, or dry urea, that's where we're starting to use the Instinct NextGen stabilizer from Corteva. And we have noticed a lot of customers trying to spread out their nitrogen instead of just putting it all up front, splitting it. And we want to continue to encourage that, and maybe in some cases even encourage a third application in season, because we're seeing hybrids use a bit more of their nitrogen, total nitrogen, later in the season. The unfortunate part is you can't always determine today whether you're going to be able to get back in and make that side dress application. And in a lot of cases, there's 25% of those acres that never happens. The other 75%, you're also not guaranteed that you get in soon enough with that side dress application. So what we're always trying to encourage growers to do is go ahead and make sure that very first application, you're not getting less than 2/3 of your nitrogen on with that first application, and stabilizing that, trying to protect that nitrogen So if you are delayed a bit getting in with that side dress application, no harm, no foul, because there's still sufficient nitrogen in place. I think one of the things we always want to encourage customers is where they can go to learn more about our products, and Corteva.us is a great starting place. If you're really interested in our nitrogen stabilizers, nitrogenmaximizers.com is another great site to visit.